In this video, I will be turning these 6th grade base plates into a massive swamp battle, featuring giant custom vehicles and much more, but I will be limited to just 3 days to build this entire battle. On the beginning of the first day, I started by adding in a black border and some filler brick. Thankfully my parents were in town, so my mom was able to help me out with this. This was really helpful as it sped up the entire process. With the filler brick in place, I can now start working on the area where I want the swamp to be. In the middle, I want to have some ponds, so I started working on those right away, adding in trans clear on top of the black to help give the water a murky look. With most of the ponds in place, I also added in some lily pads. I did this by using a mixture of green quarter tiles, and sometimes I added a flower on top. Next I added in some dark green around every pond. As you can see in real life, ponds are usually surrounded by a lot of vegetation, so in my build, I'll also be adding plants all over the place, but mostly centered around the middle. I repeated this process several more times, while trying to add in as many colorful plants as I could. With the last couple sections of vegetation wrapped up, I started to add in some more dark green tiles and plates all around the swamp. Again, my mom was able to help me out with some of these more repetitive tasks. After finishing up the dark green section, and having built for several hours a day, I really wanted to switch it up, so I started working on something else. I was really excited to get started on the custom brickful ATAP. I decided to give myself a good amount of time to finish this model, as it has over 2,200 parts, so it's probably going to take me a bit. I worked late into the night trying to finish as much of this model as possible. Ideally, I'd want it knocked out in one day. Unfortunately, my timing was a bit too ambitious and I had to call it a night. Waking up nice and early and feeling refreshed, I decided to finish up the model. Stay tuned if you want to see this thing take on some droids. With the ATAP complete, I can begin working on the grass area. The amount of parts needed for this is really going to push my collection to the limit, so I'm going to be relying heavily on 1x1 tiles and plates, 1x2 tiles and plates, and lastly the 2x2 tile. Mixing in these parts randomly will give me a good tile to plate ratio. To prevent this build from being one giant piece of flat land, I added in a hill on the left. This is a good spot to include a separatist snow tank rolling down and attacking the clones. A big vehicle such as this would definitely leave behind tracks in the mud. With that done, I can finish up the rest of the hill. With the terrain mostly done, next I'm going to be working on the forest. For the first tree, I started from the bottom and started adding some branches and leaves. Further up, these were attached at an angle to help give the tree a more natural look. Also adding in as many green pieces as I can to help give the tree a fuller canopy, and eventually adding in the last piece at the very top. Here's the completed tree. For the second design, I wanted to make a taller and larger version, only occasionally adding in leaves and branches, however, they're still placed at an angle. In total, I ended up making 5 trees. On one of the taller ones, I even added a watchtower for a clone to stand on. Later on day 2, I got in custom decal sheets which I can use to make screens. I started by trimming the decal, then I got some water for the decal to soak in. When wet, I was able to apply them onto the panel, and firmly press down with a sponge. The next step is applying sealant. Unfortunately, due to the weather, I'll have to come back to this tomorrow. With the sun shining and the wind minimal, I was able to apply the sealant. It takes around an hour for it to dry, so let's do something else in the meantime. I began with working on some equipment for the clones to use. The clones are in a swamp, so I think they should study some of the local wildlife. So I built this machine that allows them to examine some frogs. Speaking of frogs, let's make sure he doesn't get out. There's a lot of work to be done. The clones could use a helping hand. Let's attach the left leg and the right leg, and just like that, the clones have their own astromech. Wow, that hour flew by. The decals are probably ready. Let's pop the screen onto one of the consoles I made earlier. Pretty much everything is ready. Let's go ahead and place the trees I made before. Let's add the first tree, the second tree, the third tree, the fourth, and lastly, the 5th tree. It's probably also a good time to add in some foliage, so I went in and added a variety of plants around the forest. Now the final build is ready. If you enjoyed, consider watching one of my other build challenges, and thanks for watching.